Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, Miss Muji and friends. We are from the second group, and my name is Ulfa. Also, my friends there are Fusima, Windy, Agung, and Hans, would present our presentation about figurative language, which is in the poetry. And we chose two poetries here. The first poetry from William Blake, and the title is The Echoing Green. And the second poetry by Langston Hughes, the title is I Dream a World. Before we explain our presentation today, let us show you the poetry by William Blake and then Langston Hughes. The sun does rise and make happy the skies. The merry bells ring to welcome the spring. The skylark enters the bird of the bush, sing louder around to the bell's cheerful sound, while our sport shall be seen on the echoing green. Old John with white hair does laugh away care. Sitting under the oak among the old folk, they laugh at our play and soon they'll say, Such were the joys where we all girls and boys in our youth time were seen on the echoing green. Till the little ones weary no more can be merry. The sun does descant and our sports have an end. Round the laps of their mothers many sisters and brothers, like birds in their nest, are ready for rest, and sport no more seen on the darkening green. I dream a world where man to other man will scorn, where love will blaze the earth and peace its path adorn. I dream a world where all will know sweet freedom's way, where greed no longer saps the soul, no affrights blight our day. And a world I dream where black or white, whatever race you be, will share the bounties of the earth and every man is free. Where witness will hang its head and joy like a pearl, attend the needs of the mankind of such I dream, my world.
Okay, for the next I will explain 4 points. There are purpose of choosing the poetry, statement of the problem, mention the message in the poetry, and determine the target reader. Okay, the first point about the purpose of choosing the poetry, the writer chose two poems because the first poem can be portrayed as the cycle of life. It starts with the birth of spring and the little children, and then goes on the middle age with the old people in the middle of the day. The last stanza then moves into the last section of life is that. As the sun goes down on the green, this can be interpreted as being in the life finally coming to rest. And we choose the second poems because this poem so interesting to analyze because it is very motivation contact for all of us. Someone who has such as a big dream runs various ways to make this dream come true. Put aside the score of those who think their dreams are nothing. And also the writer chose both poem because in the poem contains some figurative language that writer looking for, such as simile, personification, metaphor, hyperbole, and paradox. Okay, the second point about statement of the problem. Based on background of study, the writer formulate the statement of problem as follow number one. What kind of figurative language are used in William Blake and Langston Hughes poems? Number 2, what are the meaning of figurative language used in William Blame and Langston Hughes poems? Okay, the third point about mention the message in the poetry. The first poetry is titled Encountering Dream by William Blame. The message from this poetry are spring is always calm but it also eventually ends as a life starting from childhood to adulthood to revolve around our next offspring so down was our childhood times when playing was so much fun, growing to the active and creative teenager to become successful in old age. The number 2, I dream a word. The message from this poetry are the sort be not discrimination in the basic of caste, creed, color, or religion. Everyone should have equal right to enjoy their freedom. We must not greedy and jealous, and the last we must live in peace and harmony. The last point about determine the target reader. The target reader of this poem are researcher, student, and adult. The next explanation with other friend.
Chapter 2, Discussions about definition of figurative language. Figurative language is figure of speech that use word or expression with a meaning that is different from the literal interpretations. Figurative language or figure of speech is imagination or of figure of speech that has more meaning. Warren and Martin in Amriani 2009 state that figure of speech is a departure from the ordinary, from the expression or the ordinary course of idea in order to produce a greater effect. Figurative language is used to describe an object, person, or situation by comparing it with something else. According to parents, figurative language is figure of speech that cannot be taken literally or should not be taken literally only. Figurative language is used to create a special effect or feeling. It is characterized by figures of speech language that compares, exaggerates, or means something other than what it first appeared to mean. According to parents, figurative language is broadly defined as any way of saying something other than ordinary way. In figurative language, there are many types such as symbol, simile, personification, metaphor, hyperbole, lilotes, metonymy, alliterations, allusions, and paradox. But in this research, the researchers used only 5 types of figurative language to be analyzed. They are simile, metaphor, personification, hyperbole, and paradox. Definition simile according to Goris Kirabs in the book's entitled Diction and Style 2001, page 138. Simile is a comparison that is explicit. What is meant by the comparison that is explicit is that it implies the same thing with another thing. To that end, it requires an effort that explicitly indicates the similarity, the words like, same as, like, and so on. Based on explanations stated by the experts above, the writer concludes that simile is kind of figure of speech that compare two things conveyed obviously by words like as, such. In one theory of simile, there are 2 categories of simile. They are clear and unclear similarity. The writer concludes that clear similarity is comparison between two things conveyed obviously that also contain the detail of Jurnal Ilmiah Sastra Volume 4, number 1, June 2016. similarity. Definition metaphor, according to Goris Kirov in the book entitled Diction and Style, 2001, page 139, metaphor is a kind of analogy that compares two things but in the form of a search. For example, the word or sentence which are in Goris Kirov's books, bunga bangsa, bunga darat, buah hati, Cinderella mata, and so on. Metaphor as a comparison is not using the word like, as, such, and so on, so that the first subject directly connected to the second principle. Based on the explanation stated by the expert above, the writer concludes that metaphor is one kind of figure of speech that asks comparison between things that are not conveyed obviously. And for the next definition, will explained by Agung.
Number 3. Personification. According to Goris Kirov theory, in the book entitled Diction and Style, personification is a kind of style of figurative language that describes inanimate objects or good lifeless as it has characteristics of humanity. Personification is a special feature of metaphor, which make an analogy of inanimate object to act, talk like humans. For example, the wind roaring in the middle of a dark night, it adds another of our fears. As with simile and metaphor, personification contains an element of the equation. If the metaphor as a general term to make a comparison between something else, then the personifications other things that are inanimate objects that act like a human being or human dispositions. Principle who compared it as if the human form, both in behavior, mood, and other human dispositions. The point of the personifications is to express the abstract ideas to inanimate objects as aspect of nature is described as if it were human. Number 4. Hyperbole. According to Goris Kirov's book, hyperbole is a figure of speech that contains an exaggeration by exaggerating something or disguised style containing an overstatement. Example: anger already rampant until most gloomy. According to Wren and Martin, in hyperbole, a statement is made emphatic by overstatement. Based on explanation stated by the expert above, the writer concludes that hyperbole is a kind of figurative language that is used to make the object become bigger and real object, so it will give a special effect and make the reader more imagine to understand the actual meaning from the sentence, including hyperbole, some of literary work, like in the novel which is related to this research. The second category is the style of figurative language. This figure of speech was formed based on comparison or similarities. Compare something with something else, try to find traits that show similarities between the two. Number 5 is paradox. Paradox is a figure of speech that contains the recall contradictions with the fact that exists. It is a statement that appears to be self-contradictory or silly, but which may include a latent truth. A paradox involves a contradictory yet interrelated elements that exist simultaneously and persist over time. For example, the star dance around the night sky. So point 2 and 3, analyze of poetry of The Echoing Green by William Blame. The first one, simile. Many sisters and brothers like birds in their nest. It means all human beings were family, so human beings should help each other like the birds that were always together. The second, personification. The sun does arise and make happy the skies. It means that the reader's imaginations of the atmosphere of the rising sun is not only felt by human, but can be felt by the whole nature, for example, making the sky happy. The birds of the bush sing louder around. It means that the reader's imaginations to the atmosphere cheerfulness was felt not only by human, but also by other creatures like birds, singing louder, they welcome the spring. The next poetry is another title, I Dream a World by Langston Hughes. The first one similar. Enjoy like a pearl. It is a figure of speech in which one thing is linked to another in such way that it clarifies and enhances an image. It is an explicit comparison recognizable by the use of words like or as. The second, personification, where love will bless the earth, where wretchedness will hang its head, where greed no longer saps the soul. It means this line love, wretchedness, and greed assume the role of human beings by blessing, hanging its head by sapping the soul.
The next this is conclusion from our group. After the writer analysis the data found from those two poems written by William Blames and Langston Hughes, we conclude that the figurative language used in the poem are metaphor, simile, personification, hyperbole, and paradox. From the first poem, The Echoing Green by William Blames tells us that spring is always come, but it also eventually ends. As a life starting from childhood to adulthood and will revolve around our next offspring, so don't waste our childhood. Time when playing was so much fun, growing into an active and creative teenager to become successful in old age. From the second poem is I Dream a World by Langston Hughes. Tell us there should be no discrimination, the basis of caste, creed, color, or religion. Everyone should have equal right to enjoy their freedom. We must not be greedy and jealous, and then last, we must live in peace and harmony.
That's all for our presentation. Sorry for any mistake. And thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.